Hey y'all, it's 11:11. I picked this time because it's magical, and also this was the time I came out of my mom at. Not on this day though. I'm gonna wait for some of those late art students to show up. If you haven't already got the image, I'm gonna be working with a few of them today. Hey, wait a second. I learned something from the last live stream. This being my second, I got a microphone so that I could increase my voice. The other thing was I got a bunch of copyright strikes on me on my first one. So in the future, no more music. I'm Brian Artista. My friends call me Bunny. And I hope that you guys have your stuff out because it's no fun just to watch someone talk, follow along, and hopefully you'll learn a lot from this. So how this class is going to go, and how my classes usually go, it's kind of academic. I start everything on the board. I like to do notes, and I mean, this place sold me, these are slate chalkboards. This is the reason I signed my lease. We'll do some theory. Then there'll be a small break, and that will allow me to change all the camera views, and then I will set up for the drawing part. So you can probably watch this again because I think it's going to be archived on YouTube. Maybe you need to pause, you need to slow it down. For some of you, this is going to be reviewed. So we're going to use Ryan. I've blocked out his groin because we are on the internet. So you can just imagine what that looks like underneath and draw it in yourself. I want to start with the first concept. If you've done my warm-ups, you would know that my first and most important thing is dropping the plumb line. This vertical line. Humans are really good, unless they're hammered, at knowing what's straight and perfect. Anytime I'm looking at a composition, I want to know where to put it on my paper. I want to know where its alignment is. And so this concept of plumb comes in. On these images, and on the one that I put out for today's class, I've actually digitally put some lines on. It really is the artist's choice where they put that line. And so I tend to think, look for the foot that is holding the weight. The foot that's holding the weight is a good place to start. Number two, the neck pit. Even if my legs are spread, the line still stays straight. Or if I'm leaning over, you want to look, where is that vertical alignment? Now this is all in your head, because when you have a figure model in front of you, you can't exactly hang one of these per person around the room per class. Although, when I was in some of the ateliers in Europe, they definitely did do that. And they would just have a piece of string with a washer hanging, and it would be up to the artist to align themselves to their reference. Okay? So we want to start with a plumb line. I'm going to start by going over the head length proportions from the front view of the model. Now, these came from Mr. Andrew Loomis in general. And if you don't have the Loomis books, or you can't get to the library, you can download these as a PDF for free, and I highly, highly recommend studying the Loomis. A lot of what we're going to do in anatomy, unless we have cadavers in front of us, is going to be from books and publications. Oh. Often when I'm drawing, and for some of the portions of the drawing that we're going to be doing, I might have a chart out from Gray's Anatomy, maybe the muscles. My plan in this is to draw this composition, so 3 positions of the body, back, side, and then this more dramatic turn, all laid out like that on one sheet of paper. First, I'm going to lay it out, I'm going to get my proportions right, and over the coming weeks, I'm going to put tracing paper or layer it, then I'll draw all the bones. Then I'll draw where the muscles go, and then I'll draw the idealized forms, and then the shadows. And then that way they'll understand one of the methods that we use in learning and understanding what we're seeing. Because if I simply just say, just shade what you see, it doesn't give you an understanding of all the intricacies of what these muscles are doing. And that's what I'm hoping to do in the next couple Fridays. So you just keep coming and joining me. So let's begin. Last night I got a chalk line out and I put some lines on the board so that I could tell what was in the shot, but also the head lengths. So let's start with the plumb line. I'm going to draw this guy here, right here. So I need to start with a plumb line. And you can put this plumb line and change its shape or size based off what you're doing. And you can also put it in very lightly because it might not be something, it might be something you want to erase. Sometimes I use color erase pencils in the blue or the red and put that line in. And when we move to the drawing, you'll see what I do. But for now, you want to limit the height. That's really what the plumb line is about. I find that most people, when they first start drawing they just start with the head and they just plunk it in the middle, and then the body grows, and then they have to shrink the legs, and it ends up looking more like a fish than a human being, because we're trying to make it fit. It's our job as artists to get the composition right on the shape. This was from Wednesday night, and I know there's problems, and I went through them. In fact, what I did was I took the image of Ryan, I blew it up to the proportions that I wanted it to fit from top and bottom of the page, and then I drew in the style that we're going to draw today, and that is major shapes and forms of the head, chest, hips, and then cylinders for the legs and arms to get the placement. By doing this, I could put it over top, and like an animator, flip my sheet up and find out where I was off. Because honestly, we're artists. We judge ourselves harder than maybe most people. I know everything that's wrong with this before you even tell me. And, you know, haters gonna hate, and I get comments, but I already know. I'm trying to get better here. So I'm brutally honest in that I will trace or go off of the actual photo. Because my goal is to get my eye trained to be as precise as a camera. And maybe it's humanly impossible, but I'm still going to go for it. So, in your own work, you can print these out, maybe print them the exact size you want to draw. When I'm drawing today, I'm going to draw this size, so that in the future lessons, I can put the paper over top, and I can reference exactly what I'm seeing and showing, so that even small little turns of the pencil stand out, because we don't want to cheat. We want to make this a perfect practice, and we want to improve. So by doing this, I gave myself the opportunity to learn more. And when we're in drawing mode, I'll show you guys the difference and how close that I was and where I was off. I found by doing this, being brutally honest with myself, that I kept making and keep making the same mistakes again and again. While I was drawing this, for example, I tend to put the eye too high up. So I've been compensating and putting the eye lower, and then judging and thinking and doing it again to myself. I put the eye too high again. So you have to work your way around that, or like tapering the legs. In this case, I made the foot a little big, but if you watch the live stream, you'll hear my reasoning for that. So let's get on to the next part here. Let's get our plumb line drop on our model. Now, let's talk a little bit too about the ideal versus what we actually have. The ideal things that we learned from, say, Loomis will say that the body is 8 heads tall. I haven't met anyone who's perfectly 8 heads tall yet, and we're going to see some distortions. Not only because maybe a human is not perfect, but also in our case, the camera was positioned high up. If you're taking reference photos of a model and you want them to be 8 heads tall, you need to drop your camera down to belly button length. You need to have a lens that isn't going to distort. So you need to be like 20 or 30 feet away and zooming in so that you don't get the head becoming bigger, the feet becoming bigger. There are lens distortions. And our eye is doing the same thing. Our eye is judging things, and when we're in a life drawing situation, we're moving a little, the model's moving a little, and we're seeing roundness. So we have to learn to interpret it. When it's flattened on the paper, because it's a photo, we don't really have that same problem, because the visual field that we're picking and the lens that's being used has done that for us. And so in the case of Ryan, although he is 8 heads tall in my plan, some of the things don't align up to the rules that Mr. Loomis would give us. So we're going to start by separating the line in half. So I'm just going to take my fingers and pull them together at the same time. And you can do the same on your piece of paper. Just bring them together at the same time, and that gives us half. I like to put a little X there, because when I'm doing a bunch of measurements, I have all these lines on the plumb line, and I start to get confused. Is that the elbow? Is that a muscle? What am I looking at here? I'm going to get this out of the way because I keep bumping into it. Fred, what do you think? Come closer. I missed you. So, the idealized human male as well would be 8 heads tall. From top to bottom, so we'll see where I end up here. Let's see. Okay? I've limited the height. If I had a lying down composition, I might take my plumb line and turn it horizontal. But I have halfway. And 8 divides nicely in half again, and half again, and the same for the top. So the torso, from the head to the pelvis or groin, is 4 heads tall. It goes top of head to chin, chin to nipples or sternum, sternum to belly button to groin. In our case, with our picture of Ryan, because the photo was taken a little higher, and you'll also experience when you're drawing in my studio and figure that you're lower. So we have to take into the idea of perspective. So I have 1 head distance, and when I move it down, it's higher than the nipples. And I'm just going to compensate my drawing to match. But if I take the head distance from the nipples, they match to the belly button. It's just a little bit shifted because of my view. Okay? So we still have 1 head length, 1 head length, 1 head length, and the lower half is much easier. From the pelvic region or the back of the butt all the way down are the legs. And there's not a lot of things in the legs, so we only need the halfway point. The halfway point shows the bottom of the patella, which is the starting of the tibia tuberosity, which is, let me see, this bone matter. Can you see that? I hope so. This bone matter right here. That's where we're taking that halfway measure. So in a sense, that becomes where these two distances are equal. Okay? So, the head lengths will also be used horizontally for widths. Let's first start with drawing in our head. And the order, so I've got everything, just remark my halfway point. I want to have a type of notation, a type of way of drawing simple shapes and forms like spheres, cylinders, and squares, so that I can later find the bumps and nuances. When artists go around and they draw the contours, you start to realize how bad the human eye is at judging curves. Are they too long? Are they too round? And we overemphasize things. And I find that those types of drawings, those contours, or drawing the outside, what's air, what's bunny, really is a bad way of doing it. We want to build from the inside out in a lot of ways, based off structure. So, I'm going to show you some of the notation that I use. Now, when I'm doing figure work, and it's not always true because you have to learn to dance around these things, I start with the head, chest, and then the hips, or pelvis. And the reason I'm choosing these things is the head, except for the jaw going up and down, stays the same mass. And the measurement for that would be a cranial mass unit, right? Like it's always about the same size. The skull doesn't expand or compress. The chest, which is 4 cranial masses, which we'll see when I'm drawing, and when I'm drawing on the paper, I'll keep repeating these things. That mass even though we're breathing and it appears to go in and out, it really is a cage that keeps its shape. And so that's another large mass. And then the pelvis region. Now, that region stays the same too. But in between the belly to the pelvis, that's an area that can compress and expand and twist. And so, same with muscles and arms, seeing them foreshorten, we want to have a notation that keeps consistent. Because through practice and consistency, we will improve. Okay, so for the head, I'm going to draw the cranial mass. Now the cranial mass is not the length of the head. The head length, if you've taken a portrait class from me, is 5 units. So 4 units in the cranial mass, which goes from the teeth to the top of the head, and then 1 unit for the bottom. So I'm just going to draw something like that, a circle with kind of a wedge shape. The jaw really is a wedge shape kind of shoved on it. And that's all I need. I will like to know the direction the face is going, and so I'll use a crossbar, like a crucifix on the face. He is slightly turned off the center line to the right and slightly tilted. And so I'm going to show that slight tilt, and I'm going to show where his brow line is. Now, in terms of figure drawing, that's probably enough, because depending on the amount of time I have, especially if it's short pose, I can go into that later, but I can at least know where the head is, and I can replace anyone's head there, quite frankly. Sometimes when you see more of the side, I would show the side plane of the head like that. The ear would go something like that. But he's mostly facing forward, and these areas here become where the ears will live, that get cut off from the face mask to the outer sphere. All right, let's move down. There's a gap. And one of the measurements that's used is a hand length. So my hand to the top of my head, or to my nose, or my nose to the neck pit. So we don't want to put the chest right up to the neck. We need to have a space there, and we know where the pecs are going to be. So I think that I've just learned this distance over time. And artists, because at first we're trying to learn to draw exactly what we see, study exactly what's in front of us, and then stage 2 would be to idealize it a little bit more, make it what's more beautiful, maybe like Botticelli, elongate the neck. And I think the next stage after that is being able to completely invent it based off the rules you've learned, based off design and idealism that you've developed and nurtured for yourself, what you want to say, and then you just start inventing. And that's, you can start adding arms and legs and tails. Tails is always a good idea. The other thing to consider after the large shapes, the large masses, are the angles of the hip, the shoulders, and the hips, contrapposte. So, I need to consider that he is standing almost straight, and so a horizontal line is going to work pretty much for the shoulders, and I can do that from achromium process to achromium process, right? Because you can see that, and that's a landmark. If you haven't learned the landmarks, that's another thing you need to do, is learn the landmarks. Where the bone is surfacing without muscle or fat on the skin, because those are telltale places that you can take accurate measurements from as you're drawing. Next, we are going to draw from the 10th rib up to the neck pit, an oval basically. And it should be 4 cranial masses in size. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm about there. Now, the beauty of this method is that the whole torso is kind of more like, it's one unit. It can be more rectangular, so you're going from the hips straight up, or you can think of it like a beam. You can twist, And so what we're really trying to do is draw the largest masses, the torso being it, but it has that soft, yummy jelly interior that can compress and expand. So I'm going to look for the hips next. And in this case, we can see the top of the aces close to the belly button. And I like to draw it as basically one head unit. So if I take one head unit, I'll turn it sideways. And you can use the bucket method, or you can draw a cylinder if you need. It depends how much of the side here. I might use a cylinder. If the body is pronated forward, I might use more of a bucket shape. So I've got my masses. And now I'm going to use another color to go to those angles. So I'm going to find the shoulders. One of the idealized lengths for a heroic male is taking the head length, dropping it down to the neck pit, and turning it sideways here so that you get the length of the shoulder. But in my example, only Ryan's outer arm is going to that line. So I could take that length, but I need to trim it in. Take that length, trim it in. That's going to give me the shoulder girdle. Around here is the acromion process, right? So our traps will go down to there, okay? For now, you can draw like a little neck cylinder. So we're moving down. And his chest, I should look this way for my example, is below my measured line. So the chest is like here, nipples maybe here. If I shoot straight up, I get that kind of rectangular shape I was talking about. What else? On my center line at the bottom, his foot, but it's a little bit back. This foot down here. Just to give myself kind of a place to aim, because I am going to have to bring those legs down. So I have my body mass, and I'm going to go for the arms now, just as a kind of a designed cylinder shape. Right at this halfway point, you'll notice on the reference that his radius and ulna are right at that level. So that part right there, at where the groin is where it's turning into the hand. And in this case, we'll just use a cylinder like that. And like that. Yeah, it's just be a tube at first. This goes to not just structure, but more what we might call the gesture drawing. Big, long lines. And when we're gesture drawing, we're only using 3 types of lines. C, which I've used on this side of the head, on this side of the head, which I've used to create this whole round chest shape. S, I always like to say, lower back, butt, calves, those really curvy lines, especially useful for those shapes on female forms. And I being my plumb line, being my horizontal line across the acromion process, across the hips, giving me where the tilt is. If you're using any lines other than this, you're doing far too much work. And what we're always looking for is the biggest shapes first, so that we can plot those in, and then getting trapped in the detail. The human mind just wants to focus on all the little folds of the ear, instead of realizing that the whole composition is more important than all the little parts, right? You've got to have that whole thing look good first. So, I've got head, chest, hips, shoulders. Now that's the angle, right? That's a structure in which the body can fall upon. Hips, same thing. Even though it's pressing up from the floor, I like to think of how the hip angle is. And in this case, there is a slight tilt. And you can see I've drawn it, but I'll overemphasize this tilt a little bit. And that's because one leg is in front of the other. Or when one leg has all the weight on it, you get more or less of a tilt to support the weight of the body. So where the arms can hang and are like tubes falling off the scaffolding of the shoulder girdle, the legs are pressing up and supporting the body on the hips. And so I'm going to, I see from my center line, hey, that's why I have this. Okay, if I take the head length here and I drop it down sideways here, which is where his hand is lining up, I go all the way down, and that is where the foot is. So the foot is in a vertical alignment, a plumb line, with my shoulder. So as long as I maintain that, which I've already done with this line, it won't start to look like he's falling into the splits. So by limiting space, and I think of drawing, sometimes you have to look at the negative space. Drawing is a little bit more like carving. Like if I gave you a block of wood and I said, carve Ryan out of it, you would cut like a line with the saw blade, you would cut areas away. You wouldn't just go in and start carving away, the eyeball first. You want to get rid of the major areas. And sometimes that is done with what we call triangulation. So triangulation is when we use diagonal lines to kind of cut off areas. And if I go from where my wrist is towards this line, I get a triangulated line from the foot and the hand. And that will allow me to not float things out, to not get the hip too far out, by cutting off the major parts of space first, and then building the structure from within. And so, let's get the leg in. The leg is pretty much going to here. And here. Now that back leg is in perspective. So although he's 8 heads tall and he's 4 heads in leg length, it's only the leg closest to you that's 4 in length. And it seems a little weird, but there is a lot of perspective in order to show depth. So we draw the back leg a little bit smaller and a little bit shorter. Okay? So my measure for the patella and the tibia tuberosity is actually halfway, and that's where the bottom of that knee is. But if you look in the reference, because the other leg is further behind, that knee is higher up. It's shifted back. So this total length is longer. This total length is longer. Okay? So I'm going to just put a general aim of this leg. And I have the start of my structure. Hands. Hands are a problem. And look, we went from biggest. We went from deltoid, big shoulder muscle, down to tricep, bicep, smaller, especially on an artist, down to the forearm. And look, it gets smaller, and it gets smaller, and it tapers more and more. Which is why artists actually learn the cone, because the back of the calf is shaped like a cone. And really, rather than just be a cylinder, I'm actually tapering from a biggest muscle to a smallest, which goes along with my idea of taking the biggest shapes and forms and going to the smallest. So I went from the biggest masses, the things that don't change, and now the little things that can change. And when you're working with a life model, their hands change a lot, and so you need to pick the moment in the drawing session that you like the way their hands look, and just focus on that then. But for now, I'm going to draw it using straight lines, like a box. And in this case, I'm going to chase the angle of the knuckles, and just draw some shapes for the hand. So, all the nuances and bumps and masses are built on top of this structure. I will get another color to do that. So we're going to eventually do this on paper, but we first want to get and make sure our measurements are in. Be big and simple at first, and then we'll hone it down. And the example being, I'll show you how. I will put the bones in red. The clavicle bone. There's a slight tilt. To me, they kind of look like, I don't know, like a bicycle handles, just slight, okay? And the trap going from the achromium process up towards the jaw, we'll just put that in there, right? Whoa, a little too big. I'm sure you'd like that. The point that I'm trying to show you is how we get the muscles on here. They go on top of the structure line. So this is my whole arm, and I can build, better look at it, the deltoid above. On it. You don't want to be going in and out and losing where you are in your overall design and structure. This isn't a stick man, but there's some concepts within that are like that. Like within him are the bones. In fact, I can go halfway to find out the little crook of the elbow. These are all the things that you can learn from memorization in the book. You'll see on the model that you can see his ribs and his oblique, and then the pieces. And on this model, that, what I just described, is a lot bigger and emphasized. These are the types of things we're going to look for. Okay? So I'm just going to sculpt a little bit here. Some of the contour idea now, because it's the contour that most people, when they're drawing figure, they think they have to jump in. But I would say build your structure first, check your proportions, and often I would do this in the first 20 minutes. If you watched the live stream on Wednesday, you would see that within 20 minutes, I had already done that. After that, I can do things with shadow and muscles and structures, the things that I learned and learned how to see. But at first, you'll just be happy, and I've taught so many people who've never even drawn before, and I've done stagettes, parties like that, and as long as they follow this plan, they follow this along, you get a good result because it looks like a human. If you start just chasing with your eyes and your brain, picks little details, and using a lot of curved lines, things will get distorted, and you won't be happy with your drawing, but maybe you'll get addicted to coming to figure drawing, which will be Tuesday and Wednesday nights when we reopen. Okay, let me just go down now and put what I said I was going to put in on top of and outside of the line. Tricep, bicep, forearm, down. So the other thing that I'm looking at is abstract shapes, or what we call the negative space. And I think you need to look, when you're an artist, at things so many different ways. You can't just simply look at the contour and imagine a silhouette. You can't simply understand the gesture or the structure. You can't simply memorize proportions, know them, and apply them all the time. Things just don't work that well. But we're really good at seeing abstract things. So I might look at this shape between the arm in order to draw the leg. So I might use the negative shape rather than drawing and building outside of my structure. So that negative space is a really nice way of doing it. Let's try that on this one. I'm not going to draw the bicep. I'm going to draw the negative space. So I'm not drawing the forearm, I'm drawing the negative space. And, interesting, because I've got a shadow in there as well. We'll get to that stuff later. It goes back out and across this line. You'll see a dimple on one side that the leg is in, and a place going out on the other side. This is my dream name for a death metal band, the Great Trochanter. The Great Trochanter is going straight across that halfway line. So I have it dipping in here, dipping in, and coming out here. And it's slightly tilted to match the hips. So you can look for that bone, you can look for the trochanter, you can even look for the butt flap, if it's a reverse, and see the angle of that contrapostate. Let's keep going down a little bit, and then we will break and go on to the next part. Let me just finish this side as well. It's hard to do when you're this close to the board, but I will get the quad down. I guess I can do that with negative space too. The knee. And the shin, the tibia, the fibula. And the muscle goes quite a ways out here on top of my structure and scoops in like that. Okay. Let's get the shape between the legs. I can draw some of the form, and I would use a line up here, whoa, wrong color, to show that one leg is in the front, and one of the tricks of doing that is overlap. I used it on this piece. Overlap, having high contrast brings the brighter thing more close to the viewer. That or a hard edge line. So, muscles bend in, the kneecap comes out. Here, calf, okay. So on the other side, I'll use the negative space. So I'll look at how it looks abstractly. So like this. So now I'm able to do a contour because I have a plan. And in terms of the feet, it's a wedge shape. Just close your eyes, squint down, simplify. Simplify the shape. The marker down at the bottom of the feet, the ankles which aren't in alignment, you're going to look for the malleolus, and you can see it on the outside of this one. Okay? And you can see it on this one. And I can use triangulation to figure out where this one and that one are in alignment. They are at quite an angle, okay? So, let's start to look like that. Going to take a little break. I'm going to set up and change the cameras so that I can actually do this practice on paper, which is a little different than the notes. Screenshot this if you need. Use reference books. They're wonderful. And take 5. Get yourself set up if you're going to draw with me. And if not, pause the tape and take a knee. Have a coffee.